Welcome back to my kitchen. Today we are making traditional pot stickers with Chinese cabbage and pork. This is one of my family's favorite dishes, and I have been making these since I was a kid. So that is a long time, and I've made more than I can count. I've also been teaching this class in and around Seattle for many years now. I thought I would share that with you today. This is a recipe you can also find in my book, Chinese Soul Food. And let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is make the dough, because the dough will need to rest for about 20 minutes. And while we're resting the dough, we'll make the filling for this. We will start with all-purpose flour. It's about 2.5 cups. And it doesn't matter what the brand is. You use whatever you have available to you. It could be bleached, unbleached, organic, or not. I have tried it with all different types of flour. Then we will have about 3/4 cup of tap water. Depending on how old your flour is, it may need more or less water. So we'll add this a little bit gradually and just stir that in. You can, if you're making a larger batch, do this in a stand mixer. I'm just stirring this together. It will start to clump. That's what you're looking for. Just like this, you can move to using your hands to gather the dough together into a ball. You want to make sure that when you're gathering that you try to get some of this loose flour in. And if it feels like it's too dry, now it seems like it might be too dry now, but trust me, just knead it a little bit more and just keep going at this inside the bowl until all of the dough comes into a ball. It's actually really good therapy. It feels good to work this dough. And once it comes together, you can move it onto your work surface and knead it some more. We're not working this dough in order to create a ton of gluten or anything like that. We're not making bread. So we just want to make sure that we don't have any dry spots here, and mix that all together. Okay. So once that comes into this ball, it looks really shaggy, but after resting for about 20 minutes, it will smooth right out. Put that in a bowl, cover it with a damp towel or a piece of plastic wrap, and let that rest. So the dough is resting, and now we're going to work on the filling. The key ingredient, of course, in this filling is the ground pork. And you want to make sure that you buy the best quality ground pork that you can. I like to buy ground pork that has a little bit more fat, and in many Asian markets they sell ground pork like they do ground beef in your neighborhood store with the 80-20, so there's a little bit more fat. And what you want to look for is the little specks of white, because fat is flavor, so important. If you can buy heirloom style ground pork such as Korabuta, or if you have a favorite farmer's market where they sell some really nice pasture raised pork, that would be an option as well. And if you can't find that, you can always get a piece of pork shoulder and have your butcher grind that up for you. We're going to work on the vegetables right now that go into the filling and the aromatics. The key ingredients there, we have fresh ginger, green onions, and Napa cabbage or Chinese cabbage. I'm going to start with the cabbage. So usually this is a smaller head, but sometimes there are very large heads of cabbage, and it's okay. You can get the large head of cabbage, throw this in stir fries, slaws, anything, soups. So really convenient vegetable to have around. First I want to cut this in half. You can see that beautiful cabbage inside, and there is a core here. Sometimes it's this triangular, sometimes it's a little bit round. I'm only going to need a portion of this. If you keep the core intact, it will keep all the leaves together. Okay, cutting this into quarters, and then after you have it into quarters, you can set it on the flat side and just cut out the core just like that at an angle, and then that's done. Now I'm not going to need all of this cabbage, so I will just take a few leaves and we'll hand chop this. I do this by hand because if you do this in the food processor, it will turn the cabbage into juice, and we don't want that. What we want are discernible chunks. So first I'm going to cut them into fine strips. Then we'll cut them crosswise. We just want a nice rough chop here. And the proportion of cabbage, I usually do about 2 cups or so per pound of ground pork. The cabbage goes into the pork just like this. We're going to set that aside and chop up the aromatics. So let's start with the green onions. When you have a stalk of green onion like this, you want to trim the root edge just like that. And I use the whole green onion here, so I only want to trim off the browned bits. And if the stalk is a little bit wide, you can run your knife through it. And here's a trick. Instead of cutting all the way across, I cut this into segments, and that shortens the amount of chopping I actually have to do. Okay. All right, now that we've chopped the green onions, we need to prepare the ginger. And when you're buying ginger, you want to make sure that you look for the shiny skin here. It looks very smooth and succulent, and that's what you want to look for. I do have an older piece of ginger so you can see how different they look, shiny versus not. This has just been sitting around on the counter for a while, but this one is fresher. And when you're buying ginger, don't feel like you have to buy a giant piece. Feel free to break off only what you need. Well, there's several ways to peel the ginger. Of course, you can use your knife to shave off the skin here, but you can also use a peeler. Okay. There's also the teaspoon trick. So you hold your teaspoon like this and just scrape the skin right off. All right, there are many paths to the same destination. We want to mince the ginger. There are a couple ways to do that. You can always use a sharp knife. But the method that I really enjoy using is my microplane. If you have one of these, they're very handy. I like to grate the ginger just like this into the filling. Once I've grated the ginger a bit, you'll see on the flip side, all of that grated ginger has collected. And what you do then is just tap it gently straight into the bowl. Now for the seasonings. We have soy sauce, of course, some white pepper, just a pinch of that. Sesame oil, you want toasted sesame oil, and make sure when you're buying sesame oil that it is 100% pure, because sometimes they water it down with a different type of oil. Then this gets mixed up and we'll be ready to fill the dumplings. The dough has been resting for about 20 minutes, and now we get to shape and roll out the dough. First thing I want to do is just give it a knead to refresh it and completely smooth it out. It's had that 20 minutes to rest and it looks fantastic. So you can see how smooth this dough is. And I don't need to knead it for very long, just long enough to make it smooth out. First thing we'll do is divide the dough. Okay. And then set it aside and make sure that you keep it covered so that it doesn't dry out. With this first section of dough, we want to make a rope. And what I'm doing is I'm rolling using both of my hands, but as I'm rolling, I'm also pulling just slightly. So roll and pull. And if you find that you're going to run out of space, as I can see I'm going to do, you can just break this in half, just like that, and work with one section at a time. What we're looking for here is a consistently shaped piece of dough all the way across. Okay, and this is roughly 3/4 of an inch thick all the way across. So once you have this rope, that's roughly 12 inches or so, cut them into even pieces. It's important that these pieces are even. If you have a scale at home, it's roughly 9 to 11 grams. And I have been doing this so long that I don't even have to weigh them anymore. I just know exactly how big to cut them. Okay, and now we have these dough pieces. This will become our wrappers. So at this point we have all of these pieces of dough. We do want to dust them with some flour so that they don't stick. If I roll these funky shapes, will they be round? No, they won't be round. So we have to set ourselves up for success. The way that we do that is we roll these pieces of dough into a ball, press them between our palms, and then we get this disc shape. It's like a Nilla wafer. It's a good thing to do with kids. Now that's done, we can roll these out. When you're rolling out dumpling wrappers, it's important that you have a dowel-like rolling pin. This is a Chinese style rolling pin. It is roughly 3/4 of an inch in diameter and about 12 inches long. You can buy these online or in the Asian market. And how you want to situate the rolling pin, very important. There's a zone and I want you to stay in the zone. Okay, so the rolling pin will be parallel to the edge of your work surface. And then whatever your dominant hand is, so I'm right-handed, I will use my right hand. If you're left-handed, do the opposite. But you put the palm of your hand in the middle of the rolling pin. So right underneath your knuckles, start right there, okay, right in the middle. And then the motion is you're gonna roll forward only to above your wrist and then roll back to under your knuckles. Just forward and back, that's all. So once you have that motion down, we're going to bring the dough into the picture. You take the piece of dough and set it between the edge of the rolling pin and the middle where your palm is. Okay, and I'm going to use the fingertips of my other hand to hold it in place. We'll roll forward only to the top of my wrist here and back. You see I didn't pick up my rolling pin. I turn the dough a quarter of the way and then roll forward, roll back, a quarter turn, forward and back, quarter turn, forward and back. And now I have the start of a circle. And I will repeat this rolling motion all the way around again, okay? It's a rough circle, and that's okay, it's home cooking. This is something that I learned by my mother's side. Growing up, I had to earn my way up to rolling the dough. At first, I could only make these dough balls, and then I had to learn how to actually use the rolling pin and make the wrappers. So this is something I've been doing for a very long time. All right, we have the last wrapper, nice and rolled. Let's fill them up. You want to take about a teaspoon, heaping teaspoonful or so. And depending on how large your wrappers are, you may need more or less filling. And that just takes a little practice. Okay, so I have the filling, and then I'm gonna do a few. This is the traditional way of pinching that I learned. Just like that. Nice little fat dumpling that we can put onto our tray that has been lined with parchment paper. So the pleating can be tricky and it takes a lot of practice, and there are different styles of pleats too. So I showed you one kind, but if you just need something that will get you from A to B, that's an easy thing to do. You fill it and then just fold it in half and seal them. There is nothing fancy about this. The end goal is just to seal the edges, and then you can set the dumpling on its spine just like that, jiggle it a little bit, and then you have a dumpling. But of course, I prefer to have some pleats in it, because what happens when you make some pleats is that you get a little bit more surface area, and the surface area down here is where that crust is going to form for the pot stickers. You want that perfect bite with the crispy bottom, the chewy top, and juicy filling. Now the important thing to remember is it takes a lot of practice to get the pleats exactly right every single time. This is home cooking. It's not going to be exactly the same every single time, and that's okay. Mine look different every time too, and I have to concentrate in order to make all the dumplings look exactly alike. Now everybody loves having frozen dumplings. You can make your own frozen dumplings. Once you've made them and set them on a tray like this with parchment paper, you can put this in the freezer just like this for about 30 minutes. Transfer these to a Ziploc bag and then freeze them completely. Then you have your own frozen dumplings. Just remember, don't defrost them. Cook them frozen. Now it's time to cook the pot stickers. First thing I'm going to do is preheat my nonstick skillet. And I like the nonstick skillet because it gives me the best results for the crispy skin. I would avoid using stainless steel because that will create a little bit of a mess that you'll have to scrape out. So as my pan is heating, I'm going to add the oil. Now the amount of oil you add will depend on the size of your pan. The idea here is that you have enough oil that it pools on the surface, because we're actually frying the bottoms of the dumplings. And as the oil comes to temperature, I can start placing the dumplings into my pan. And be very careful because this oil is hot. So just fit as many as you can into the pan. They don't have to have a ton of space between them, just enough so that they're not sitting on top of each other. And now comes the dangerous part. We're going to add water to hot oil. I like to do that by having my lid ready to go, and I use it as a shield a little bit. But for this size pan, I'm adding about a half a cup of water, and the lid goes straight on. What's happening now in the pan is that you can hear all that dancing around and sizzling. That is the telltale sign that your pan has reached the right temperature. The bottoms are cooking in the oil, and the top is going to steam in the water that you've just added. And this will cook for about 8 to 10 minutes. You'll be able to tell that it's almost done because the water will steam off and the residual oil will finish browning the bottoms of the dumplings. Oh, these are done, and the kitchen smells amazing. And what I'm looking for is this gorgeous color right here. That is the perfect color. And then we just scoop these out onto the platter. And I like to serve them with the bottom side up so people can see just how beautiful these dumplings look. And to serve this, we have a dipping sauce that has soy sauce, rice vinegar, ginger, green onions, garlic, and some chopped cilantro as well. It's very savory and delicious. So there you have it. That is my family's pot sticker recipe, which I hope you will make at home and enjoy. Thanks for joining me today.